Hi, good morning, everyone. I know many of you are in different parts of actually the world. So thanks a lot for joining. I hope it's a convenient enough time. And this is the last webinar in 2020, which has been quite an interesting year. At least I was chatting with someone actually who was on this call last 2 days ago that it has been a great year in its own way. It has really helped us to reflect and calm and think in different ways what the different possibilities are. And I think as an organization, personally, I feel we have become stronger. We have worked on certain muscles which we had never used before. So that's a positive way of our side of at least us. And same thing is true on family and personal relationships also. Far more conversations happening, connecting with many friends whom we never connected in the last 20 years, maybe, at least that's for me. So we are fortunate today to have Betty with us. And Betty has an interesting background. She is obviously CTO of Microsoft Commercial Partner Canada part. And also she comes from the outsourcing world. She was with Deloitte earlier. So she brings maybe more empathy to the outsourcing world and obviously has many more experience. And maybe the way we will structure this webinar is obviously I'll ask Betty to introduce herself and share her background, and then she has around 15 minutes presentation. And I really like that because that brings certain structure to this fireside chat. And then we'll just go deep into questions. So feel free to ask questions. You can put it on chat box, and yeah, and we take it from there. It's a very informal way of doing the chat, and many of you have attended this one before, so we'll go with the flow and yeah, enjoy the event. Betty.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Pankaj, for the intro. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks so much for inviting me. As Pankaj said, I'm Betty Rhiger. I'm the CTO for One Commercial Partner here at Microsoft Canada. I actually joined Microsoft about 10 months ago from Deloitte. I've been in the technology industry for about 30 years. Actually was a tech support, software developer. I was an account lead. I've worked in strategic sales and spent the last 16 years on the consulting side of the industry. So my background's fairly broad, and I think I bring a few different viewpoints, having sat with the clients on their side, having actually been hands on keyboard, having done an operational role. So with all of that said, today I'm here to talk about cloud transformation. So I'll present my screen and we'll get rolling. All right. Can you see my screen all right? I'm going to say silence of acceptance.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's start off with why cloud transformation is important. Digital transformation is the evolution of business. Digital transformation embraces the necessity of change. What kind of change are we talking about? Optimization, identifying and implementing efficiencies, innovation. There's no magic button or switch that you can flip for any of this. So digital transformation is about a process of change where you're fundamentally changing the foundation of how your business works. I'm sure most of you already know that if you or your customers don't digitally transform and evolve, their businesses are not going to survive in the long run. And then all of this is actually compounded by some factors in our environment that are driving change in our businesses. For most businesses, the greatest assets are the employees, or the heartbeat of our operations and our customer engagement. Whether they're on-site or remote, employees with the right collaboration tools can effectively partner with each other to address business needs and service our customers. And in a time of crisis like the one we're living through right now, workplace safety and the security are critical. We also see dramatically shifting customer expectations. The COVID-19 crisis caused a lot of change in customer behavior, much of which we feel will probably be irreversible. We've all experienced buying a product that is dramatically different today than it was in the past. And it goes without saying that, especially in the midst of an economic downturn, businesses look to drive out costs and to shift to more agile and efficient technologies, looking for cost savings and shifting away from their legacy systems. As well, most, if not all, industries are facing a level of disruption from regulatory, from new business models. The COVID crisis has amplified this exponentially. From the small engineering firm that had to suddenly shift to work from home and adapt to new methods of collaborating, to the large-scale retailers who suddenly had to shift to online purchasing and curbside pickup. Some went better than others. The ones that didn't go that well shall remain nameless. And to small retailers that who had never had an online presence, where suddenly they had to shift. If they wanted to survive, they had to shift to a brand new business model. We have a lot of large enterprise clients where, when their entire workforce shifted offline, realized that they were not equipped for that. As well, many industries are facing a changing regulatory environment, from the regulation of the finance industry to shifting privacy regulations and so on. Our technology actually has to be flexible to meet those changing requirements in a cost-effective way. Now, add to all of this the current pandemic crisis that we're living through. Satya Nadella said early on in this crisis that we've seen our customers achieve 2 years worth of transformation in 2 months. So now you've heard all of this, and you've convinced that you and your customers need to make this shift and this transformation happen. So what's next? Change is hard. It affects people and process, and not just the processes. The decision to commit to change is actually only the first step. Many business leaders already realize that change is much more than just swapping out the technologies. It's an incremental process. We need to evolve how you're doing business, and that then affects the culture of your company for all of your employees. It's important to understand the breadth of the change that's required to achieve cloud transformation. So change is more than adopting the technology. It's actually adopting how you do business. Microsoft has a cloud adoption framework that we use. It helps you understand that shifting into cloud is not just, it means changing how you do business, not just swapping out the technology, changing your enterprise, the culture behind it, and yourselves too. We share best practices from our employees, from our partners, from our customers who've already been through this journey. We have obviously leveraged the incredible transformation that Microsoft has been through in our shift into a new culture of agile and innovation. The cloud adoption framework brings together people, process, and technology, and all anchored on a strategy that's aligned to your business goals. We also aim to do this efficiently. So we provide actionable guidance along with a set of tools and templates that really help our customers and our partners support those customers, do this in a quick and efficient way. Cloud transformation is difficult, and it takes a long time to get there, but we can help, and we can make sure that you're not reinventing the wheel. Leading people through change is difficult. It's not just the technology that changes, it's the people and the process as well. So the right process needs to be iterative and needs to be anchored on a strategy. Our vision for cloud adoption is that you anchor on a strategy that is crystallized by working cross-functionally with your finance, your marketing, your sales, your HR, including your business units, in order to anchor on a clear strategy. It needs to include clear motivations. Why are we adopting cloud? It needs to include defined business outcomes. What are the results that we expect to see from adopting the cloud? And it has to include a business justification. How is the business going to measure their success? Plan for the tactical inputs, like defining your workloads, defining the assets that are going to shift, aligning your organization, making sure that you've got the necessary skills. This is a cross-team effort that is balanced out by the technical team. The technical team takes the vision and then begins the execution, but the execution can't happen without the rest of the team. We recommend this kind of iterative planning to drive your cloud adoption effort. It enables your technical teams to move incrementally in phases towards cloud adoption. So what does this mean to yours or your client's environment? Customers need to strategically review their on-premise workloads and define a couple of different paths based on triggers. They need to look at their infra, their data, and their apps and classify them for migration or modernization, depending upon the trigger. So are they going to rehost workloads or whole data centers where they have a time-bound trigger? The intent is to get out of data center ops and save some money and effort. Or alternatively, they tweak or do surgery or rebuild workloads that are core to their customer or operational experiences, where they need to stay competitive. And all of that, also don't fail to consider retirement. What applications do you no longer need? Large enterprises typically have huge volumes of applications sitting in a portfolio, and even small to mid-sized business. Look at them, decide whether or not these are applications you even need to continue to host, or is it something that you're really keeping for archival purposes? Ultimately, the North Star is innovation and agility and productivity. And cloud migration is the first step that helps customers live the cloud lifestyle without introducing too much workload level change all at once. So what are the pitfalls that we want you to watch out for? The process that's on the page is our cloud adoption framework. This is backed up, like I said, by a lot of detail, a lot of tools and templates to help facilitate each phase of this, but there are still pitfalls that you have to watch out for. So the first, make sure you've got a defined strategy. I've been into many different customer environments where they've gotten partway down the path and they don't feel like they're achieving what they wanted to achieve. They're not sure if they've achieved the outcomes that they were looking for. And frankly, often it's because they actually started down this path without a real idea as to what digital transformation meant for their organization and what the outcomes were that they were after. This is why that's such an important cross-functional team effort. The business outcomes, they aren't typically technology outcomes. These are, speed to market. They can be, agility. They can be your employee experience. There's a lot of different business outcomes that you can anchor your cloud strategy on. Next phase, of course, is plan. So where do we start? There's a lot of work that has to go into where do you begin this effort? Is the most important outcome that you're driving your employee experience? Well, that's going to change the workloads that you view. Is the impetus for a cloud transformation actually a big end of life event that's coming in a contact center? That's going to change where you start your cloud transformation. So where do you start? There's a lot of work that has to go in understanding what your wave 1, your wave 2, and your wave 3 are going to be. Next, who are the stakeholders? This is the other issue that we often see in customer environments, and the more complex, the bigger the issue this is. We often see our customers not really consider who all is going to be impacted and who all has a vested interest in the outcomes. So make sure you've thought through all the stakeholders and that you have their buy-in. If you don't have buy-in, you can hit huge roadblocks along the way. The next one, oftentimes we see, especially in environments where you haven't had a heavy dependency on service providers or outsourcing, where you're worried about your team not having the skills to adopt cloud. So there's a lot of ways. You need to build a skills readiness plan to revector the people on your team, and also think about who on your team should be revectored. Oftentimes, we see in IT environments that you wish these people had time for more strategic views, that you wish that they had time to look at your applications and identify where you could do better, but they didn't have that time. So where do you want to take people that are currently, firefighting for a living and shift them into more strategic work and reskill others to continue into your operational environment? Or where do you want to rely on a third party to start supporting? It's important to understand where that's going to come from and who you need to reskill. The next is getting ready. So we have another framework called well-architected framework. We believe in creating our landing zones in advance of actually going into the environment. I think everybody in the call has been in and around technology, and we all know that the devil is in the details. So you can have a great strategy and you can have a great plan, but if you have not paid attention to the details, you can run into a lot of problems and frankly cost yourself a lot of money. A shift to cloud can save you money if it's done the right way, anchored on the right strategy, with the right plan, and with the right details in mind. So then we get into adoption. So as you're migrating workloads, how are you going to ensure that you're maintaining the quality? Have you paid attention to what the quality was in advance of migrating your workloads? So you really have to have a solid plan for how you're going to make sure that you're achieving that quality as you shift workloads. And then, of course, there's also the innovate. Are you adapting existing offerings? Are you building new offerings? Are you shifting applications? You have to think about how your users are going to adopt that change. Making a change for the sake of great technology or cool technology isn't going to work for your users if they don't know how to use it. Of course, governance sort of underpins everything. For those that do know me, you'll know that governance is one of my soapbox issues. Putting governance in place early, making sure that you understand how you're going to incorporate feedback back and you're meeting on a regular basis is critically important. And making sure that you're actually incorporating those learnings in your plan as you go. Again, I talked about the iterative process. I think it's so important to make sure that you're taking your learnings and then incorporating them as you go. So, of course, the other aspect of governance is not just sort of iterating on your plan. It's making sure you've got the controls, the compliance, and the security all needed for a cloud environment. Shifting to cloud, even when it's software as a service, doesn't mean that you've handed over all support and you don't need to think about it. There are a lot of rules that you continue to have to play. Even after you've moved into a software as a service, you continue to have to think about how you're going to incorporate the latest release into your environment. Is there functionality you're going to use and functionality you're not going to use? Are you pulling data out of that application that you're using elsewhere? So you need to think about the compliance and privacy rules around those. So governance continues to be incredibly important, and highly recommend thinking about that even up front in your planning, to think about who needs to be engaged, who are the stakeholders, and how do you ensure that you're paying attention to all of the details. And again, we've got templates and formats and workshops that we run around these things and that our partners can run for you to help you make sure that you're covering your bases. And then, of course, last but not least is the management. How do you make sure that you're managing your environment? Operations change a lot, but they don't go away. So we need to make sure that you've skilled the right people, you've understood where handoffs are going to happen between you and your providers, and make sure that you've thought about who you need to engage and where. So with that was a very quick run through. Thank you. And why don't we head to some questions? Stop sharing my screen so that I can see you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Betty. Whatever questions I had, most of them you already answered in your presentation. So I have to think of some new questions, but I would request anyone, if they have any question, please put it on the chat box and we'll take it from there. So one thing, Betty, we were actually, or rather, I have been pretty engaged in cloud very early. We built one of the largest AWS companies in Canada starting 2013, and I'm not engaged with that company anymore. We exited that one. And so we are, as you know, Optimus is 100% focused on Microsoft Azure. And really the way Azure has come, Now I think I'll definitely say it's a dominant leader in terms of capabilities, pricing, scalability, and most importantly, the security. You must have seen the recent security thing which happened 2 days ago, and Microsoft is actively involved in that. Yeah. So there's a lot of noise in the cloud market. One cloud, multiple cloud, hybrid cloud, and then there are specialized cloud vendors like Snowflake, Databricks, which obviously partners very closely with Microsoft. So any thoughts on, like today, I think you can build any solution just being pure 100% Azure services, etc. Or you should try to pick best of the breed from different cloud vendors, whatever you perceive as a customer, best of the breed, and then integrate. Any thoughts on what can go wrong, what works, what doesn't work?
So I'd say underpinning security fundamentally is making sure that you're treating it like it's not a set of tools that you're going to implement and then you've done your job. So security is a management activity, right? It's an active, you have to be able to stay current. So that said, best of breed, I am not opposed to best of breed, but it does add a level of complexity, because now you do own that integration point and making sure that you're covering all of the bases. And again, I'm not saying that I think that is the wrong answer. I think you need to think about, as a customer or as somebody who's implementing security for a customer, what is the skill set that you're putting this into? Do they have the capability to manage a best of breed situation? When you buy your security tools from a single entity, when you're buying it as an integrated package, there's an advantage there, because all of the toolkit, that they all integrate and that you've covered your bases. So for sure, that's a quick answer to that question, and it's a really complex issue. You have to do your homework and make sure that you understand what you're getting into, and ensuring that you're covering all of your bases. So I'm not opposed to best of breed. Obviously, Microsoft products are best, but
So the good thing which we have seen in the last 2-3 years now, there is no more really discussion around whether I should move to cloud or not.
Right.
I think most of the organizations feel, unless there's a very, very specialized application which they feel they need like nanosecond type of performance or whatever, where they want to be on a specific data center, etc. But otherwise, the biggest challenge which we face is really, which you covered in your presentation, is around the inertia. Just status quo, not doing anything. And then multiple reasons. So, I have this, I have that. So any thoughts on that? How to overcome that inertia?
So it is really tough, and it's funny to talk about organizations. Where the inertia is most frustrating is where they've been talking about the cloud shift for 5 years and still haven't made a move. And a lot of those organizations, when COVID hit and suddenly they had to go to work from home, all of a sudden realized that 5 years of talking about it was wasted time. And they suddenly had to find a way to make things happen very quickly. Unfortunately, for organizations that are stuck in that inertia, too often it's a crisis that forces them to make the move. So, if we're talking to customers and trying to convince them to make the move, I mean, there's a few options. There's a few, I think, sort of key things that we talk about, right? There's security, which, security and meeting regulatory requirements. A lot of this is just inherently built into a cloud offering. I think you need to think about agility, time to market. Are those organizations really going to survive going forwards if they're not making a shift into a more agile and flexible environment? And then there's employee retention. When you think really hard about your employee experience, those environments that are electing to sort of stay in a legacy world, your employees are not having that same experience as they could have elsewhere. And that's something you've really got to think about, especially in the technology industry, where keeping our people is tough, and finding new ones is tougher, and keeping them trained is tough. So that's one of those areas. You just want to, retention is the best way to make sure you've got the right folks.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of different things that can be the impetus for change. Anyway, it is tough to deal with those customers that are sort of stuck in a bit of inertia. You can talk about revenue growth from some of their competitors that have made the shift already, but it is a tough discussion to have. And like I said, too often it is a crisis that suddenly makes them change.
Yeah, we have a customer. They're actually a big or good Azure case study. They are a leading company on restaurant software, and many of the Vancouver people know them as Coral. And really within 30 days or so when the COVID hit, they could make a lot of changes because online ordering suddenly became big, curbside pickup became big, a lot of integrations, etc. So that shift which they could do, it was very, very inspiring. And I think a lot of it they could do because of the agility and flexibility which Azure or cloud infrastructure could bring to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. You look at grocery retailers. One of the grocery retailers in Canada actually hit their 3-year target for curbside pickup in the first 2 months of COVID.
Yeah.
Like, that's an incredible statement, but they were ready. Like, they had made their shift, right? They knew they had everything in place so that when everybody decided they weren't going to go into the store anymore, they were ready. So the crisis hit and they were not challenged to keep up. Another retailer, who shall remain nameless, they even had to shut down their website because their website couldn't even handle the traffic from online purchasing. So, for them, COVID hit, and because they weren't ready, it was disastrous, right? Yeah. So, things are going to happen. Environments change. Your competitors can outmaneuver you. If you've made the shift into a digitally transformed environment, you can quickly react, and we've seen that over and over again.
So, any thoughts on hybrid cloud? That topic comes very often. So, and I know you're recording this, but don't tell anybody I said it. I think hybrid is actually just a reality of the situation, right? So, especially in large enterprise. In large enterprise, you're going to have software as a service. You're going to have, your HRIS is going to be a software as a service application. You're going to have niche tools that are, if it's finance, that are managing pieces of your banking operations. Realistically speaking, there's going to be a bit of a hybrid. Obviously, if it's your own environment, ideally you end up with one because there's a cost to going to a multi-cloud environment. So if it's your environment, your application structure, there's a cost to integrate and to make sure that you've got the management layer working across a multi-hybrid cloud environment. But that said, I think Microsoft, as well as some of our competitors, recognize that multi-cloud, hybrid cloud is going to be the reality, and so our tools are designed to make sure that you can manage the entirety of your cloud environment, but from the one toolkit. Recognize that you're going to have that management layer in place. Nothing exists without the managing layer. You cause yourself a lot of problems. So make sure that you've got that you're at least picking tools that are going to allow you to manage the entirety of your hybrid environment from one place. Having to add into that the integration layer is complex and costly. Yeah. So one question from Milan, which is across all digital transformation drivers, which one you think, if you have to pick one, which one would be which has the maximum ROI?
Ooh. That's a great
pre and post-COVID, yeah.
So, and I probably a year ago may have answered this completely differently, but I'm going to say the disruptive business models is probably the biggest driver. And I think I may have answered that differently a year ago, and I would stand corrected today, because actually the biggest ROI is going to come from changing your business model, because you then are able to adapt to a changing market, right? New ideas and innovations in your product, in the way your customer insights, and the way you reach out to your customers and the way you can connect to them. All of that is so much easier to achieve in a world where you have an agile and flexible environment. Your applications have been modernized. So I 100% believe that disruptive business model, that's really where the biggest ROI is going to come from. And on top of that, because it's not a cost play then. Yep. It's, you're probably talking about some of a cost play, but there's a revenue impact there too, right? So that business outcome, that's where you get into the real ROI.
Yeah. And I think you covered a little bit, maybe coming back to the blockers when somebody migrates from on-premise to cloud. If you have to pick again one blocker of what's the biggest challenge you see, at least what we see is just sometimes the organizations don't have enough resources to focus on it as a program management because they are running their current shop and then this migration has to happen. So just the lack of leadership or program management, that's at least we find as the biggest challenge. Any thoughts on that one? So
I'll give you an amen to that, Pankaj, because too often we see clients that want to do the big shift and they don't take the time to make sure that they've got enough people and that those people have the right skill sets. This is complicated, and if you haven't done it before, having done something else complex over here doesn't mean you've got the skill sets to go do the complex thing over here. So make sure you've got enough people and the right people. I would also say that we see a lot of clients think that they're just going to get it done quickly by doing a lift and shift. And don't really think through what lift and shift means. Lift and shift is not a pure migration. In fact, that can cost you a lot of money and oftentimes doesn't come up with the benefits that you're looking for. So when you're moving from on-prem and into a cloud environment, even if you think, listen, we just need to get out of our current data center, this is why we're doing it, you still have to think hard about all of the details that go in and around that. There is no simple when it comes to a cloud migration.
Yeah. So another question which is coming again is more around basically like a big bang approach versus doing it incrementally. That should you take one or two, basically what should be a trigger point? So should you take one or two applications, move them to cloud, show how it works, etc., or just get rid of your data center, move everything to cloud first, and then think what to do? Any thoughts? Yep.
So I think before you do anything, even before you go into a big bang approach, you need to stop, create your strategy, and create your plan. Because even a big bang approach, there are probably applications that don't need to make the move. There's often a set of applications that aren't that valuable to your organization anymore. They exist for archival purposes. They have a very small user footprint now, things like that, where even in a big bang approach, we need to get out of this data center because we have a time trigger that's going to happen to us. Even that doesn't always mean everything. Now, as for big bang versus a more waved approach, I am a proponent of doing this in waves. I think you need to do a couple of applications that are aligned to your business outcomes that you're going to be able to demonstrate success, and you're going to be able to help people learn what they need to do and help your team adjust to their new roles. I'm a big believer in doing that incremental approach in waves so that you learn as you go. So I know that big bang, sometimes we're just in a spot where that's got to be the answer because we have a timeline trigger that we've got to hit. That's going to happen, but I don't, in my view, it's not the ideal approach.
And so on one side is the applications, etc. The other side is all the productivity tools like Office 365 and VDI and SharePoint, etc. And Teams, for example, we are a big Teams user as well as we are seeing beautiful integration. Actually, now the integration is pretty good on. I say that's actually another advantage of COVID. I think honestly, I think quality of teams improved significantly. So, but
yes, it did.
so is there a value in taking office productivity tools first and make organization more cloud savvy? Because many organizations today have like they will have Slack, they will have something else, etc., etc. But today with Teams, no, it's really much better way of doing things. Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of improving your employee experience. And I do think it makes a big difference, like you said, to help your people adapt to a cloud type environment before you start making the shift into cloud. So there really is something to be said about that approach, because your employees and, by the way, the teams that are actually deeply engaged in your cloud transformation will have better collaboration tools. And I'm a big believer in the employee and improving your employee experience. But let's be clear, you're anchoring all of this on a set of business outcomes, and those business outcomes are really important. So you also do need to make sure that you are thinking about what the business outcomes are, because it could very well be that you are at a crux point with the application that you provide to the market, and maybe you really do have to make that digital transformation first, because otherwise you're going to lose clients. So making sure that you're anchoring these decisions on your business outcomes that you aligned upon early on, very, very important.
Yeah. So another question is, most of the organizations have hundreds of workloads, small or big. So if you have to pick, say, one or two to start based on the risk reward analysis, any ideas on which should be the workload to pick first? Any do's and don'ts around that? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of hard do's and don'ts. Hard do, make sure you've anchored on your business outcomes. I keep talking about that, and I think it's probably because it's the one thing that I see a lot of clients not do that well. They use high-level terms like, oh, we're going to get efficiency, or we're going to save some money, but that's not really defining your business outcome, right? So let's make sure that we've defined the business outcomes really clearly, and then that's where you anchor those workloads. Don't start with the biggest, hairiest, most complex thing in your environment and think that that's a good idea, right? You've got to make sure that you're starting with something where you get to demonstrate that you're making, strides towards achieving your business outcomes. But also, let's be clear, the first couple, you are figuring out what this is going to look like for you. You're, streamlining your change management methodologies. You're working out how best to communicate with your employees around some of the adoption and change management that they've got to do. So, that plan phase is so important, just to make sure that you've thought about those waves and how you're going to roll them out. But like I said, absolutely don't start with the biggest, ugliest, hairiest thing in your environment. That can be disastrous.
Yeah. So now, since we have 5 minutes left, any more questions? Feel free. Otherwise, okay, let me come to a little bit a tougher question.
Oh, great.
So typical organization, I'm on the data centers, etc. I'm thinking of moving to cloud. Obviously, there are 3 players: Microsoft, AWS, and Google, GCP. Mm-hmm. So what should I do? How do I decide which is the right partner? Is there any framework to analyze, to how do I make that Excel sheet? Yeah.
Right. So.
Sorry, this question, I'm not, I just thought of it.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And obviously, I work for Microsoft. Just go Microsoft. I'm going to save you a lot of time and effort. But in reality, I think it starts with anchoring on what your current environment looks like. Understand what your service levels are. Understand what regulatory requirements you've got. Understand the footprint that sits in your environment. Now take all of that and boil it down into your set of requirements, and think about what you wish you had. Is your service level sitting at 99.95, but you really feel like you need 5 nines? Make sure that you've taken all of that and boiled it down into a set of requirements, and then start your comparators, right? Because the financial aspects of all of this, that's important, absolutely, but there's a lot more to picking the right cloud platform for you than simply the financials. There's a whole set of functions, features, service levels, requirements that you've got to make sure that you're hitting, and you have to be doing an apples to apples comparison, right? So there's a lot of regulatory certifications that are built into Microsoft. Are you getting those same things from the competitors? You know, there's a set of service levels, DR, et cetera, that get built into different aspects. The security tools that are built in, all of these things, all of that matters. And so you have to build from a requirements perspective, a true apples to apples comparison. As for whether or not there are spreadsheets, obviously I don't have one to compare myself to the competitors, but I would say rely on people that have the expertise, right? Like Optimus, you guys, this is what you do for a living, right? Rely on people that are partners that really know how to do these comparisons and do them well. Don't expect that because you've got people that understand technology really well, that they're going to be able to make that comparison. Don't expect that because you've got somebody who understands the financials around your IT environment really well, that they're going to be able to make that comparison, because these things can't sit independently of each other. You need to have somebody who understands how all of the pieces fit together. Moving to cloud is complex. Obviously, there's 1,000 reasons why it's a great idea. That comparison is equally complex.
Yeah. And one thing just to add, and actually Betty touched on that, actually we love the cloud adoption framework. It's a thick document, but really I think as an organization we have adopted, and obviously we help. It's like not open source, but it's available on the net, and we run that with the customers doing the discovery workshop using cloud adoption framework, and really customers get a lot of value out of that, even irrespective whether they go for Azure or not, just how to think of cloud and other things to do, not do POCs, etc. It's a phenomenal way of figuring things out on the cloud adoption side. Yeah.
Absolutely. Having spent 16 years in consulting before joining Microsoft, I had not actually, before I joined Microsoft, seen the cloud adoption framework. I will say, and you can call me biased if you want, but in my view, it's the most thorough framework that I've seen for a cloud migration. I have not seen anything that includes that level of thought and tooling and frameworks, et cetera, to make sure that we're supporting our customers and going down the right path. That's why it's so complex. Developing a framework like this is not easy. We've leveraged learnings from partners like yourselves. We've leveraged learnings from our own experience and from our customers to make sure that we've got something that's really thorough. And it also adapts and changes as we learn more and we develop better, new best practices.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Betty? Anything, because we have maybe 1 more minute left. Yeah.
So final thoughts. I can't emphasize the importance of digital transformation. I think every organization needs to be aware that if you're not transforming digitally, if you're not moving to a cloud environment, if you're not getting agile, it was such a great question, which are the digital transformation drivers that's the most important, that every business is going to be disrupted. Can't think of one that's not where their business model isn't being disrupted. And if you have done this, you can react. If you have not done this, reacting is a difficult, painful, and typically lengthy and costly experience. So this allows you to adapt and change.
Thanks a lot, Betty, for your time, and it was phenomenal. Really the way you could explain and handle all our questions in a very user-friendly way. Thanks a lot for your time and energy.
Thank you so much for inviting me.